Fangs and Infernos, there is nothing that Devil and I love more than breaking down horror movies, talking about directors, having killer interviews, and that's where this conversation comes into play because we are doing another one of our horror con reviews. And this is a really, really cool one. So, all of the cons that we do, my friend, are always a great time. I mean, the cons that we go to as fans, we rarely, if ever, have anything particularly bad to say. The cons that we get to go to as professionals, are very solid, pretty consistently. We might have something that we don't feel as much, or we thought maybe could have been a little differently here, or maybe something in between. But overall, we appreciate all of the courtesies that these cons extend us. But this is a particularly cool one because this is a con that actually reached out to just our community, with nothing promised. Not, and I don't mean that as in reaching out to the podcasting community to then leave them hanging. I mean, they reached out to the podcasting community because they wanted podcasts involved in their event. And you and I were on our way to either one of our cons or a concert or something. You and I were going out to do something when we got a kickback that we had made their, finals of their podcast consideration. So we responded. Everything went great. We got picked up. We were really stoked for a series of panels that we were going to do because they made it, really clear to us that they definitely liked what we were about and wanted us to be involved with their panels. So we were super duper hype. And then unfortunately, tragedy struck. For anybody who's not familiar with the con we're about to talk about, is completely family run. And they had a major family situation that happened pretty much right before the convention was getting ready to happen, like within like a few days. That was something that was just completely unavoidable, and they had to handle that. But anyway, that being said, fast forward a little less than a year later, and it happens. And this would have been and was the Maryland Pop and Horror Con that we went out to the Best Western in Baltimore off of O'Donnell Street. And Devil, this was a cool one, man. We got to see TMS alumni. We lost one I'm sorry, V&D alumni. We lost one V&D alumni, but that was just due to unfortunate circumstance with a cancellation of their flight. But overall, it was really, really cool. It was a fun vibe. It was very well run, a little bit on the lighter side, but I think also because this wasn't home base, there's a feeling out process that probably needs to and was going to have to happen. But again, man, Maryland Pop and Horror Con, I felt incredibly, I felt that we got a lot of hospitality from them, and overall, definitely a great time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, I've been familiar with the brand for a little while. The fact that the Maryland Pop and Horror, they've done it a couple times, but also, they run the Tidewater, horror convention, which is all the way out, in Virginia Beach. I've heard about that before. I know a lot of my friends and stuff like that has gone to it. I know like our buddy from Monster Mania, Rob. He's a huge Tidewater guy because he lived out in the Virginia Beach area and stuff like that. So. You know what I mean? So yeah, I've always heard of them. They've always had some cool guests and stuff like that. But yeah, it was pretty cool. We were like, hey man, we like to, like to be considered. Maybe doing a couple panels and stuff like that. And like I said, they were like, heck yeah, man, we like what you guys do. And then, even when we go and we got these panels, we were supposed to be there for Saturday because the event was Saturday and Sunday. We were supposed to be there Saturday to do panels, but then I had a previous engagement that I had to do, so we had to move it to Sunday, which was cool and stuff like that. And like I said, we still came down to the con on Saturday just to kind of check out the hotel, check out the vendors, check out the area, kind of give a little bit more of a walk around, especially because on the Sunday when when we're doing our panels, we were pretty much booked in the
Yeah.
which was cool because we were doing it in the Baltimore Comedy Club house. I mean, it was pretty
Yeah.
cool, man. Like seeing the people who have been on that stage. We're talking to these celebrities on the stage that like Charlie Murphy and stuff like that's been on the stage and done it. So it's really, really cool to be on, to be able to do stuff on that stage. But we knew we were gonna basically like 4 hours of just straight paneling. You know what I mean? We knew we weren't gonna be able to mosey around and check things out nearly as much on Sunday. So that's why we wanted to come on Saturday just to kind of check out and see all the cool vendors and see different vendors and see some similar vendors that we see at other cons, and then see friends and family like Kid Dreadful was there, so we're always going to run into them, and it's stuff like that. So yeah, it was pretty cool, like a pretty cool event. I liked it, you know what I mean? I thought the hotel was super cool.
Yeah.
They had the two floors. I mean, the only problem with that was they had an elevator to get up to the other floor, and they only had one working, which it just happens to be like a lot of cons that we go to all the time. There's always issues with elevator, whether the escalators or the elevators or any of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's always something. But like I said, you can't blame the con for that. I mean, it's that's beyond them. They can't control what the hotels breaks down in the hotel and whatnot. And that was the other thing too. Like it was super super hot, and I really liked it because it was nice and chill. And some of the in the hallway area was kind of warm, but in some of the vending rooms it was nice. But the comedy club was a frigid like 30 below zero.
And
Man, it was nice and cool, especially when you're coming in from the hot weather outside. It felt really good.
James was playing like sweater roulette when he was in there with us, man, because he went in like, this is good. And then it's like, wait, before we get started, I need to get my sweater. And then, like,
Yeah,
after that, he was like, it's back out in his table where, a lot of windows, a lot of open space, and just a lot more warm air. And he's back into a short sleeve t-shirt. But it was just kind of funny watching, sweater roulette with James. That was
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
a fun one. But no, I'm definitely with you, man. Like my only thing really when it came to like that location, I loved the ability that the Baltimore Comedy Factory allowed for. Like just the vibe and the feeling of like we get to conduct this panel live to an audience on this epic stage that all these amazing people have performed on, just legends of the field. That's an amazing asset. And I thought that was very, very cool. It's with just simply the way that the Best Western is designed. I found that the two floors thing was tricky, in my opinion, but only also simply because, again, it's simply the way that the building is designed. This is not a knock to Maryland Pop and Horror. It's the design of the building. Is that it's not so much that it was two different floors, it's that there was kind of genuine distance between those two floors because you got to go up to like the fifth floor to continue the con versus like being on like the mezz or second level and then the very next floor kind of being where it's continued at. There was a little bit of exploration that had to happen when it come to this. And don't get me wrong, again, they had the signage where it needed to be. It was not difficult to find these places, but it was a little bit of a hike. And when you do get people that may or may not have like somewhat of mobility restrictions, it was a little bit of a hike when it came to those. But as far as the way that the rooms were set up, I thought they were set up great. I thought it was a really good flow. You and I have reviewed recently some other cons that are trying new places where it felt very cramped. It was very difficult to like find things, to see things because it just kind of had this overwhelmed feeling because of the way things were put together. I definitely didn't get that vibe from this whatsoever. You had the two vendor rooms slash the two celeb rooms. And just for clarity, I mean, it's not two separate vendor rooms and two separate celebrity rooms. It was the first main vendor room with that also housed, half of the celebs. And then you had the upstairs vendor room that housed the rest of them. That definitely kind of had them paired in like proper ways, which I thought was cool. Since, you had the first main room that was, the scary movie cast, as well as a couple of others. And then you had sort of kind of the kid-friendly style design. And then you had kind of the longevity cast out in the actual hall where, Warrington was out there and James were out there basically bookending Kid Dreadful's table, which I thought was kind of like a cool thing. So that was really my only thing as far as like, because you go up the stairs or you go up the first little elevator and you're boom, you are like right in Conville. Like you are right where you need to be. Versus going up to the fifth floor. Again, plenty of signage, plenty of direction, but it definitely felt a little bit of a hike, when it came to getting to that room. So not the overall most ideal design when it came to that, but that's really just minimal nitpicking on something that was definitely set up well. Because when you got to those areas, again, very properly spaced, very easy to navigate, and very easy, to find the places that you wanted to shop at. So yeah, just a unique design, a little different than the majority of cons and the way that hotels are set up. And also that being said, a Best Western is not a Hilton. It's not a Marriott. It's not one of those large scale buildings that's really going to have multiple ballrooms kind of in a shorter distance for convenience. The Best Western is a little bit more smaller designed. So there's just certain, situations that you just kind of have to take a little bit with a grain of salt because it's just the way to have the best space might be a room that's a little bit over here as opposed to being right there.
Yeah, yeah, and I thought it was really cool too. Like I said, when I first came in on Saturday, I got to meet up with the people who were running the con and stuff like that. And then they had the one guy that was kind of escorting me to go meet. They wanted us to go and meet the celebrities so that he can introduce us to us, and so that you say, hey, this is going to be one of your hosts of the panel. And I thought that was kind of cool, and I thought it was kind of interesting, even though I think for two out of our four panels, we didn't really need to, but I thought it was kind of interesting that it was upon us to go and get the celebrities and escort them to
Yeah,
to the panels, which I thought was pretty cool. I was just like, oh, okay, like I'm just so used to just like everybody kind of like their handlers or something like that, but
right.
so we obviously when we first went up, to get Steven to talk to him about obviously it was pretty interesting. I thought our conversation with him was going to be a little bit less cool and fun because I really only really knew him as doing as being in that Return of the Jedi and doing that kind of stuff like that. But then we found out that all the music ties and ties with friends and families of us and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it ended up working out. That ended up being a really really cool interview. But we had to go get him, and then we went to grab James, and James was awesome. He was really cool to talk to, and just like
Lori
just
Beth and
one.
Warrington appeared.
Yeah, yeah, they just kind of they both were just kind of there all of a sudden like okay, I'm like cool. Somebody say something about his mama or something like that. He was trying to get, and then obviously maybe somebody had some some highly questionable questions to ask Lori Beth or something like that. But yeah, yeah, it was kind of interesting. Yeah, they were just kind of like poof, we're here. I'm like okay, cool, and we just kept on like running in. The first time we were trying to go and introduce ourselves to them, like we just kept on running into Lori Beth at the elevator. So it was like we met her at the beginning of the con at the elevator, and when we were leaving the con we met again in the elevators again. So it was kind of like pretty cool. But yeah, like with James and stuff like that, he was just one of those
Man.
guys that like man, like even afterwards we were we introduced ourselves and stuff like that, and he would say, hey guys, Ron, remember our names, and we were talking. Then we're like at the end of the con, he's, trying to wrap, everybody's wrapping up and stuff like that. We're listening to music and we're like, hey, man, we were talking about like, old school and new school industrial music. And these guys who are bringing back like the 80s kind of like, sound kind of wave kind of stuff and stuff like that. So he was showing us all these bands that he has on there. We were
Oh
talking
man.
about ones of ours like Priest and stuff like that.
Priest,
So he
Night.
got into that and stuff like that. So it was just kind of cool. Like we were just like we were just like it was just like one of those ones, kind of like how we like when we done interviews, like they said with Felissa and stuff like that, or even like Lou Temple. It's just one of those guys that like is just cool, down to earth dude. And like the crazy thing about the panel, even when whenever you guys watch the panels that we get to post, so that we barely even scratched the surface of James's career because we were just talking and having such good long conversations about some of the films that he was doing
If
that we didn't even really get into that much. But it was really cool too because
if
even
he was our fourth panel devil, we could have gone for 3 hours, even
yeah,
though we know it wouldn't have worked because the Comedy Factory had an actual event afterwards. But
yeah.
man,
Yeah, he was just cool. He was just like showing us like, behind the scenes photos and stuff and video like on his phone and stuff like that of some of the movie projects that he was involved in. Yeah, he was just a cool guy. And like I said, it wasn't even like, we missed like a couple like, no name movies, man. We missed a lot of, we didn't even talk about a lot of the some of the bigger ones too,
dude,
just
we
because we
didn't
were
get into
having such a
Gone in.
good conversations.
Oh man, we didn't get into Gone in 60 Seconds. I mean, there is,
Yeah,
yeah,
go. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
go
Yeah, he
like,
was. Yeah, he was just super, super, super cool. Like I said, Lord Beth was really, really fun. I love the conversations that we were having and stuff with her and stuff like that. I love that, and even like Warrington and like the main thing that I found that was kind of chuckling and kind of kind of put a little pat on our back and stuff like that. Whenever like we had the girl that we were emailing back and forth that was
Nicole.
running the con, Nicole. Yeah,
Oh
we were talking
man,
to
what
her.
a
Super, yeah,
sweetheart and
super nice,
genuine.
man. Yeah,
Oh,
like everybody at that con that was working were just like super, super nice, super friendly. Just like, hey man, if you guys need anything, just let us know or like that. They were cool. Like, hey man, bring whatever you want to bring, do whatever you want to do. And they just kind of like let's free range, and that was the cool thing. Like, even Nicole came to us and was like, hey, she was like, man, I guess because she just kind of went after we did the panels and kind of just made sure like the panels were all good, that they were treated well and blah blah
yeah.
blah. And she was like, "Oh no, everybody was singing your guys' praise. Like, man, they were like super, like, man, these guys were super nice. They, asked if there was anything that we shouldn't talk about, or kind of made everything so it just seemed really really cool that that they not only did we have fun doing these panels and doing the con, that the con people were like, yeah, yeah, like they were like, man, they were super. Everybody was like super impressed on how well you guys just were able to do these conversations and have the panel. I thought it was pretty good. Like shout out to Steven for suggesting the table that we just kind of just sit in front of a
Yeah, everybody
table.
liked the table.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it was he was like, "Can I just get a table?" And we're
Just
like, "Hey,
like for
man,
our
get
ham.
whatever." I was like, "Get whatever whatever you're the celeb, man. Whatever you need, man. Just let us know. We kind of get you comfortable as can be." And that's kind of what it was. It just kind of like seemed like it was just like you know, three people just shooting the shit and on the on the back porch of the back porch of the house, with a beer in the hand or something like that.
Totally, Devil. And shout out to Baltimore Comedy Factory too for letting us just pluck a table off the ground without even really asking for permission. We just did it because that was Steven's comfort zone, but we kind of picked our battle properly as well because we were like, well, let's not take something that's kind of clearly in the normal location of like where fans would probably want to sit. Let's pirate something like from like off the side. So same thing with our merch table. And again, shout out to Maryland Pop and Horror that they were like, no, bring whatever you guys want. Like if you have merch, bring it. Try to sell it. We would definitely like you guys to be able to do that. And we did, a little bit of a big old fat goose egg when it came to Vampire and Devil merch, but that's really just a secondary thing because again, the setup of the convention of the Comedy Factory wasn't particularly very conducive to our merch table, just because yes, we could have put it on the other side where people probably would have seen it. But that's all. But I was like, yeah, but at the same time, I don't want to have all of our crap right in front of where the fire extinguisher is. Like, I feel weird about like having stuff in kind of the emergency area. So, but it's all good. But just the fact that they were like so hospitable to be like, no, push your guys' brand, bring stuff. If you want to try to sell things, we are right there for you. But yeah, it was just kind of the little things because that was definitely kind of like an in the feels moment too when we were talking to her and she was like talking about how conducive the celebs were and how comfortable they were and how much they enjoyed their experience because even when we were talking to the panelists and talking to Lori Beth and stuff about if there's anything that's off limits, it's really just simply something that you and I simply just do based off of our experience just as professionals, even outside of V&D with, our two, respective side projects in TMS and EE. It's just, we understand that some people will talk to what, for lack of a better term, a controversy, not necessarily on them, but a controversy might be in the cards somewhere. So it's always just good to take that second to just to clarify and verify if there's anything we can talk about or any places we can't go or any places that they would prefer to skim. And it's something that, I've been so used to us just doing as a common courtesy that to actually hear that kind of brought back, because again, I had forgotten about it. Because the Lori Beth was our second interview, and so we're hearing about this like 3 hours later, that that was still something that was addressed as, hey, we really appreciated that they did this. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, well that's right, but it just felt like something that was important for us to do. And even with James, I mean, it was kind of cool too and really fun when he kind of dropped the bomb on us in a tie into a V&D alumnus that he's in the backing band for Jane Jensen, which I thought that was super duper cool because that wasn't something that I was familiar with. I loved his enthusiasm talking about somebody like Jenna Malone, when he was in Donnie Darko with her and how she's still got this very consistent working, career, but where her original movies looked like they were going to put her up here, but she's just stayed this very artistic actress. And that was super cool. But yeah, we didn't even, we put a dent in it, but man, we didn't really scratch the surface of a lot of the other heavy hitters that James had been involved in. I loved talking to Warrington. That was probably the most challenging of them because I know that a lot of guests, I mean, a lot of fans, Jason, that's what they know. Friday the 13th part 2. Like that is what they know. That is what they care about. They might not know other things outside of that. And I was definitely aware of his book, because he had that at a previous con. And but man, he's so like into this book that it was kind of crazy. And it took a second to just kind of, while we're talking to him, you and I are kind of like mentally constructing how to go about the interview based off literally what we're reading off of him. And that's what I thought was really, really cool, where he was talking about, the book, the story, how it got started, the plans for follow-ups, like the copywriting and like the establishing this character and, you know, color schemes and craziness. I mean, I got to give Warrington a lot of credit. That dude is passionate for this book, and we got to talk to him about, a potential opportunity about, maybe finding a way for us to be able to assist in, the promoting of his book, which is definitely very, very cool that he was just so like down for that possible conversation. So that'll definitely be something really, really exciting as well. And I mean, again, yeah, Steven was so cool. He's already reached out to us about his excitement about when his interview goes live on our channel. So we'll definitely get that out soon. But everything was just super duper cool. And again, I look forward to how Maryland Pop and Horror goes like in the future. Because again, I think this was just kind of a slightly unique design. They had, the trials and tribulations of the reschedule, a slightly different lineup. But overall, it was just so cordial and it was such a good vibe. There was no weirdness. There were great cosplayers. There was a great Akasha from Queen of the Damned. It's probably my favorite costume that I saw walking around. There was a guy who I think he was like one of the not like a I think it was like one of those Call of Duty or video game, kind of looked like a stormtrooper, but he wasn't a stormtrooper
It
character.
was Halo.
What's up?
I think it was Halo.
Halo, that's it. And this guy was like super committed to the Halo project. but overall it was a really good vibe. And then in the next segment, we just have to go into like the little things, old friends and new friends. So we got to touch base with V&D alumni and John Abrams and Lachlan Monroe, and that was super duper awesome. And it was so great to see those guys again, and give them a couple of our 8x10s and just shoot the shit and talk about just fun things and the movies and the current success of Scary Movie 6. And you and I talked a little bit more extensively with Lachlan, because we really kind of have that bromance relationship with him over about like what we thought about the movie, because it wasn't that long after we saw the movie for your birthday that it was kind of like it seemed like it took a moment to kind of get going. It felt a touch choppy in the way it was designed at first, but then it definitely flowed in a good way, but it still felt a little bit more pieced together. But it was still just great, seeing, the family again. And then also getting to meet, Fedor Steer for the first time, who's this amazing character actor from like The Haunting of Hill House. And of course, he was the Art the Clown Santa from Scary Movie 6. So of course, I came running for that to add to my Terrifier collection. But so much cool stuff that he's been involved in, and he also had a lot of enthusiasm about wanting to do a live interview. It just didn't quite work because, again, like you had said, 4 out of like our 6 hours of that day were very, very tied up in Panelsville. But he's, given us the green light to want to do an interview with us, and I definitely know that that's going to be an exciting future for us as well. But everything was just so super cool. I was definitely a little like disappointed that we lost Natanya Ross due to filming, because we had talked to the organizers about that. Just because even though she was a blink and you missed it character, I grew up loving Little Monsters, and just the to have the opportunity to meet somebody who was in that movie again, being in it for 5 seconds was irrelevant. It was just like I've always genuinely loved that movie. So a little bit of a disappointment that we lost her due to a filming conflict, but hopefully down the line, you know Maryland Pop and Horror, or just another con in general that we attend, might give us that opportunity again down the line. But overall, it was really really cool, really really cool experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's interesting when we were talking to Lachlan, you know what I mean? Talking to him about all the great things and stuff like that. Like I said, we talked to him about going to see Scary Movie 6 and like that. You brought your totally killer DVD for him to sign because we were talking about how enthused he was about that movie when we did our interview with him. And I think it was
Exploded my feels,
and it
man.
was just funny too because I didn't even know when we took the picture that it happened, but I remember the one you posted with Lachlan. You got Abrams, the freaking John over there, freaking photo bombing us, which is just funny because it's just like and we talk about that with Lachlan. When we did our first time, we did the interview with Felissa, with him coming in and doing it, and we told him like how she pimped him out to us and said, hey, you need to do this, and I told him about when we met her just recently again at another event. She was pimping us out to Dave Sheridan and stuff like
Yeah.
that. You do his podcast, and he was like, "Oh my god, that's so funny." I was like, "Yeah, yeah." So it was really cool. It was really cool to see John again. You know what I mean? We talked about how we loved the scary movie and stuff like that, and got to talk to him for a little bit. Yeah, Fedora was definitely pretty cool. You know what I mean? He's one of those guys that like I said, he's more of like that creature kind of monster, kind of has that feel of like, like we were talking about with like Doug Jones and things like
Yes.
that. But yeah, yeah, he was just super cool, super nice. Like, he was like really down to like, yeah, man. He was like, he actually to a point where he wanted to talk to us.
He
And we're
found
like, oh yeah,
us.
he was walking around the con to find us. He's like, oh, I was looking for you guys. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't trying to blow you guys off. And I'm like, no, 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 man. Like we want to do the same. You know what I mean? But like I said, the time didn't really work out very well. But yeah, Mister. Mr. Santa Claus right there, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Which was cool because we taught them about how like we're old school, like not even just old school Wayans fans. And that was the cool thing I was talking with Lachlan about, how like
Yeah.
it's crazy because people were talking about Scary Movie 6 and it didn't do that well, and as far as like the IMDb. But I'm like, yeah, the critics didn't like. You look at the first Scary Movie, which is like probably the mecca of all the scary movies. The critics hated that. The critics have hated almost all the Wayans stuff. You know what I mean? White Chicks and everything else. It's like no, it's like they never got it. I'm like, I've been a fan of the Wayans, from "When to Get You Sucker" to "In Living Color" to all the movies that they've always done. So it was like it was really cool. But then like
Don't be a menace. And
yeah, don't be missed. But we're talking with Fedora, talking about it. I'm like, yeah, man, it's really cool because we've got to meet. Since we've been around for a little while and we've been doing these cons and stuff like that. We're lucky enough to meet. The OG Terrifier from the old days. We got to meet. David from the new. The Arthur Clown that everybody knows now. And then we got to do the interview with the McDonald guy, the guy who was the stunt double for him
oh,
in
yeah,
part three.
McFarlane.
Yeah, McFarland, and then now with Fedora, we're like, you're like technically the fourth Art the Clown that we've got to meet. He's like, oh man, that's pretty sweet though that you've got to meet all those people. And I'm like, it's like yeah, it's yeah, he was super super cool about it. But like I said, I liked all the stuff that he was talking about working with the on the the haunting of how of the manor and stuff like that,
Oh,
where
The Haunting of Hill
Hill
House.
House and stuff like that, talking about working with that guy, the guy directed that, and how I've always liked it. I like he's got that like old school like Stephen King kind of feel to his movies and stuff like that. So it's really cool. I'm looking forward to our conversation with him because I feel like that one's gonna be a good one.
Absolutely. No, it's definitely going to be a good one. So Fangs and Infernos for sure. Definitely keep your eye out for that one. But more importantly than that, keep a lookout for our 4 upcoming panels that we have coming out in the very near future. We're going to launch the review and then we will have the panels coming out not that long after. So we got Stephen Constantino, we've got Lori Beth Denberg, we've got James Duvall, and then we brought it home with Warrington Gillette. It was definitely such a cool experience overall when it came to, just the con in general. It was so well run. Again, there's probably just a little bit of like, growing pains that maybe have to happen only based off, the situation from the reschedule and of course schedules. You're always that's a disclaimer that always comes with cons, Fangs and Infernos. It's always something to keep in mind. And Devil and I have talked about this at cons. It's never a good idea to like set up your entire experience over one guest because anything could happen. Somebody could get ill. We mentioned Felissa. She was the person that I had kind of like mentioned at the beginning of the review. She literally had a flight canceled. Like there was no way for the reschedule flight to get her there on time for it. Even at a 2-day event, you want to make sure that you're fully available because she might have only had limited time where it's like, hey, my flight was canceled. I would have gotten there, but I would have gotten there at this time. But the problem is I would have had to have gotten back on a flight to maybe go out and film. Because again, she's incredibly active, all the time. So it's definitely something to keep in mind to never just kind of, you know, don't don't make your entire experience about one particular guest. Yeah, I'll use myself as an example. The main person I was super excited for as far as just getting an autograph for was Fedor. Getting that opportunity to get Scary Movies, Art the Clown, and add to my Terrifier collection, If something had happened, bummer, disappointment. It happens. It wouldn't have stopped me from going and being like, well, all these other people are there. There's vendors. I mean, you and I finally got, we got our hands on our little trash zombie from the Return of the Living Dead for Funko. So that was very, very cool. So it's always important to never just hinder your experience on one person. Take advantage of the overall situation. You and I got some really great prints that were given to us from one of the vendors, and that was super duper cool. Getting stuff from like Captain Spaulding and Dracula and the Oogie Boogie. So much cool stuff when it comes to that. But no, overall, a really, really good experience and definitely enjoyed it for sure. And I definitely look forward to you and I, hopefully continuing what we already feel is a pretty strong relationship with Maryland Pop and Horror Con. So hopefully the next event, when we come a calling, hopefully they're all about it.
Yeah, for sure. You know what I mean? And to the point that they even, handed out their, their pleasantries in their hands to even come to the Tidewater one. It
Yeah.
just happens to be at the time where, you'll be going back home to hang out with with the witches in Salem.
Yes.
So, but yeah, but I know they do. I know they do a couple events a year down there, and that'd be pretty cool. And like I said, hopefully, they come back and do, that the Maryland Pop one, definitely still, comes around and stuff like that. So we're definitely looking forward to that and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to seeing, who they're gonna bring, what they're gonna bring, and like I said, maybe, hopefully, like I said, that with that hotel, there might have been some good things, or there might have been some bad things about the hotel, but that comedy club was a freaking definitely a plus. So, I'm kind of hoping that they can stay there, just because that use of being in that cool venue was really an awesome experience.
And I want to take another stab at that bar restaurant that we didn't get a chance to take advantage of
Yeah.
either, that we went and kind of explored when we realized that that was where Warrington had been hanging out the whole time. But we were like,
Yeah, there's a bunch of sharks on the old freaking
yeah, I
wall
was
and
like,
shit.
man,
Yeah.
this place is rad, but definitely a cool thing when it comes to that. So definitely great time at Maryland Pop and Horror Con. Again, we want to thank the organizers first and foremost for their courtesies. Such a great time. And also, as we touched about it before, Bloody Social. That is Warrington Gillette's new book. Definitely make sure that you guys are going out and checking that out. He's got a lot of ideas for it when he comes to wanting it to maybe be turned into a movie or a mini series, but definitely a series of books. And it's a really, really cool story. It's a really cool, like, revenge stylistic, just bloody good time novel. And definitely go out and check it out because I really think you guys would enjoy it. And if Devil and I are able to put something together where we're maybe able to help assist Warrington, well, fuck you out of that. And if that doesn't happen, that doesn't change the fact that we want nothing but continued success for Warrington's book. So we get more books when it comes to that. But again, thank you absolutely to Warrington Gillette, James Duval, Lori Beth Denberg, and Stephen Constantino. Amazing times. We appreciated your courtesies for being so down to let us host your panels and have such great conversations. And then we really, really appreciate the kind words that you delivered to the organizers on our behalf, that you guys felt comfortable and that you guys, definitely felt respected and enjoyed your time. So that way, that relationship that you guys had with the organizers will stay very, very strong. So we are definitely stoked about that. But again, a great time when it comes to Maryland Pop and Horror Con. So, of course, keep in mind that you definitely want to support these live cons. Go out and meet your heroes, but also support the small businesses that are there with vendor tables and all the cool stuff in between. And a shout out, as always, to seeing our good friends and family in Kid Dreadful. We love Cheyenne, we love Coral, we love Scar. They're all absolutely fantastic. But that is going to be it for us at the moment when it comes to the Maryland Pop and Horror Con. Keep an eye out for the upcoming panel releases and let us know what you think. We're definitely always stoked to hear about what you guys have to say. And of course, we want to always thank our partners and sponsors of the Vampire and Devil podcast. Always, of course, with rockandhorror.com, which is also our merch store. Thank you to Mark and Lizzie. Make sure that you follow all of their socials because any of the deals that they run and the discounts that they run apply in the Vampire and Devil collab category on their website in our merch store. So keep that in mind. And of course, John Kozik with the Salem Vampire Museum and the Salem Witchboard Museum and the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore. Twisted Vines with Chris and Saren. Chris with the Buffalo Bill House, and then, of course, Brutalities. Thank you so much for having us, Maryland Pop and HorrorCon. We can't wait for the next time. We'll talk to you guys real soon. And Fangs and Infernos, we will see and talk to you guys really soon. Horns up. Fangs out. Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies.
merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies. We got some shirts. We got some tanks coming up. We got some booty shorts. We got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast. Thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up. Fangs out.